The rain had just started to fall, a soft drizzle tapping against the pavement as streetlights flickered in the evening mist. It was the kind of night where people hurried home, pulling their coats tighter, eager to escape the cold. But amid the rushing city, beneath the dim glow of a lonely street lamp, a tiny figure stood motionless at the bus stop. A child, no older than 3, clutching a small tattered teddy bear, his shoulders trembling with quiet sobs. Nathan Caldwell had never been one to notice things like this. A man like him, wealthy, successful, always moving from one business deal to the next, had little time for strangers or their troubles. His world was built on power, on numbers, on making things happen. But something about the child caught his attention that night. Maybe it was the way the boy's tiny fingers curled around his bear as though it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Or maybe it was the sheer contrast of such innocence in a world Nathan had long believed to be cold and unkind. His car was waiting just a few steps away, the driver standing by with an umbrella. He could leave, go back to his high-rise apartment, a sip on his expensive scotch, and forget he ever saw this. That was the easy option, the logical one. But logic had never left a child alone in the rain. And so, against everything his instincts told him, he found himself walking toward the little boy. "Hey, buddy!" Nathan's voice came out softer than he expected. "Are you okay?" The child didn't respond. He only sniffled, his small face streaked with tears, as he stared at the empty road ahead. Nathan glanced around, expecting to see a frantic parent rushing toward them, but the street was eerily silent. No one seemed to be looking for him. No one seemed to care. A strange feeling twisted in Nathan's chest, something unfamiliar. He had built his empire by being ruthless, by keeping his emotions out of business. But this wasn't business. This was a child, alone, afraid. Kneeling down, Nathan tried again. "Where's your mom or dad?" The little boy finally looked up, his big, watery eyes locking onto Nathan's. There was something haunting about the way he looked, like he had already seen too much of the world, like he had learned too soon that life wasn't always kind. "Mama said to wait," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of distant thunder. Nathan's stomach tightened. "Wait for what?" The boy hesitated before answering. "She said she'd be back, but she didn't come." Nathan swallowed hard. He checked his watch. Nearly 10 p.m. No mother in her right mind would leave a child alone at this hour. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Do you know your mom's phone number?" Nathan asked, but the child only shook his head. A light breeze sent a shiver through the little boy's fragile frame, his tiny arms wrapping around himself in a weak attempt to stay warm. Nathan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. He wasn't good at this. He didn't know how to deal with kids. But he did know that he couldn't just leave him here. "Come on," he said finally, reaching out a hand. "Let's get you somewhere warm while we figure this out." The boy hesitated, his small fingers tightening around his teddy bear. But after a moment, he slipped his hand into Nathan's. It was so tiny, so light, like he could disappear if the wind blew too hard. As Nathan led the child toward his car, a nagging thought wouldn't leave his mind. Who was this boy? Why was he here all alone? And most importantly, what kind of mother tells her child to wait and never comes back? He had no idea that the answers to those questions would change his life forever. Nathan sat in the back seat of his car, the city lights flashing through the rain-streaked windows as his driver navigated through the quiet streets. The little boy sat beside him, his small hands still gripping the worn teddy bear, as if it was the only familiar thing left in his world. He hadn't spoken much since getting in the car, just sat there, staring at his fingers, his little legs swinging. Slightly above the seat, Nathan wasn't sure what to say. He had spent his life in boardrooms, negotiating deals worth millions. Yet here he was, completely lost on how to comfort a scared child. He glanced over, studying the boy's face, his dark curls damp from the rain, his eyes tired, holding an expression far too heavy for someone so young. "What's your name, buddy?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice gentle. The boy hesitated before answering. "Oliver." Nathan gave a small nod. "That's a strong name." Oliver didn't react, just pulled his teddy closer. "Do you know where you live?" Nathan asked, hoping for something, anything, that could help. Oliver shook his head. Nathan let out a slow breath. He could take the kid to the police. Let them handle it. That's what any reasonable person would do. But something deep in his gut told him this wasn't that simple. Something about Oliver's silence, the way he sat there with that sad, lost look in his eyes, made Nathan feel like turning him over to the authorities wouldn't be enough. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call. "David, I need you to look into something for me," Nathan said. The moment his assistant picked up, a missing person case. A little boy, 3 years old, name's Oliver. See if there's anything reported about him. David didn't even ask questions. He just responded with his usual efficiency. "I'll start searching now." Nathan hung up and glanced at Oliver again. The boy's breathing had slowed. His eyes blinked heavily, fighting sleep. "You tired, buddy?" Nathan asked. Oliver nodded, but didn't let go of his teddy. Nathan sighed. "All right, we'll figure this out in the morning." By the time they arrived at Nathan's penthouse, Oliver was barely awake. Nathan carried him inside, setting him down carefully on the couch. He had never taken care of a child before, but something about this small, fragile boy made him feel responsible in a way he couldn't explain. The next morning, Nathan woke up to the sound of quiet shuffling. He found Oliver sitting on the floor near the window, tracing circles on the glass with his finger. He looked so small against the backdrop of the towering skyline. "Hey," Nathan said, walking over. "You okay?" Oliver turned, hesitating. Before asking, "Is Mama coming back today?" Nathan's chest tightened. He crouched down beside Oliver. "We're going to find her, okay?" The boy nodded, but his lips pressed together like he wasn't sure if he believed it. Before Nathan could say anything else, his phone buzzed. David's voice was urgent. "Nathan, I found something." Nathan stood up, his heart picking up speed. "Go on." "There's no missing child report matching Oliver's description," David said. "But I dug a little deeper. A woman named Emily Carter, single mother, was reported missing 2 nights ago." Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. "That's Oliver's mother." "I don't know for sure," David admitted. "But listen to this. Emily worked as a waitress at a small diner on 5th Street. She left her shift late that night and never made it home. Her co-workers said she was acting nervous that evening, like she was afraid of something." Nathan's mind raced. He glanced at Oliver, who was now watching him quietly, sensing something was wrong. "Do we know if she had any enemies? Someone who might have wanted to hurt her?" David hesitated. "There's more. Emily had recently taken out a restraining order against a man named Ryan Cale, her ex-boyfriend." Nathan's jaw clenched. He had seen this kind of situation before. People with power using it to intimidate those who had none. "Find out everything you can about Ryan Cale," Nathan said. As he ended the call, he turned back to Oliver, forcing himself to smile. "You hungry, buddy?" Oliver nodded hesitantly. Nathan ruffled his hair. "Let's get you some breakfast." But as they walked toward the kitchen, a single thought kept repeating in Nathan's mind. If Emily was in trouble, was Oliver supposed to be in danger too? And if so, Had Nathan just walked into something far more complicated than he ever imagined? Nathan sat across from Oliver at the dining table, watching as the little boy slowly ate his toast. His tiny hands gripped the crust carefully, taking small bites like he wasn't used to having a full meal in front of him. Something about that made Nathan's chest tighten. He had spent his entire life chasing success, buying expensive things, closing deals worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. But none of that had ever made him feel the way he did. Now, watching this small child, knowing that somewhere out there, his mother was missing, Nathan's phone buzzed again. He quickly glanced at Oliver before stepping into the next room to take the call. "I've got something," David said. "Ryan Cale, Emily's ex, has a record. Assault charges, restraining orders, all linked to past relationships. But here's the worst part. I pulled his bank transactions. He recently withdrew a large sum of cash. No pattern, no purchases. Just a withdrawal." Nathan felt his grip on the phone tighten. "You think he paid someone off?" "Maybe," David said. "Or maybe he's planning to disappear." Nathan glanced back toward the kitchen, where Oliver was now swinging his legs under the chair, humming softly to himself. He was too young to understand the full weight of what was happening. But Nathan understood. "Where does Ryan live?" Nathan asked. David hesitated. "Nathan, if this guy's dangerous, you can't just—" "Where does he live?" Nathan repeated, his voice firm. A pause. Then David sighed. "An apartment on the east side. I'll text you the address." Nathan hung up. He knew he should call the police. Let them handle it. That was the smart thing to do. But deep down, he also knew how these things worked. People like Ryan slipped through the cracks. Restraining orders were just pieces of paper. And while authorities dragged their feet, Emily could be running out of time. He glanced back at Oliver. He couldn't take him along, and he didn't trust just anyone to watch him. But there was one person he did trust. 30 minutes later, Nathan pulled up outside a quiet suburban home. A woman opened the door before he even knocked. She was in her late 40s, kind eyes but sharp, like she missed nothing. "Nathan," she said, arms crossed. "I wasn't expecting you." "Didn't have time to call," he admitted. He stepped aside, revealing Oliver, who peeked up at the woman shyly. "I need a favor, Marla." Marla had worked for Nathan's family since he was a child. She had practically raised him after his own mother had passed. If there was anyone in the world he could trust, it was her. She softened as she looked at Oliver. "And who's this little one?" "His name is Oliver," Nathan said. "And he needs a safe place for a few hours." Marla knelt down. "Well, aren't you just the cutest thing?" She smiled warmly. "Do you like cookies?" Oliver hesitated, then nodded. "Well, lucky for you, I just made some." She held out her hand. Oliver looked at Nathan, who gave him a reassuring nod, before taking Marla's hand and stepping inside. Nathan exhaled. He wasn't used to trusting people, but he knew Oliver would be safe here. Now he had to finish what he started. An hour later, Nathan stood outside a rundown apartment complex, rain drizzling as he stared at the door number David had sent him. He knocked once, no answer. He knocked again, harder this time. A voice from inside. "Who is it?" Nathan's pulse pounded. "We need to talk, Ryan." Silence. Then, the click of a lock. The door opened just a crack, revealing a man in his late 30s. Greasy hair, dark circles under his eyes. He looked suspicious, like someone who had been caught doing something they shouldn't. "Who the hell are you?" Ryan muttered. Nathan didn't waste time. "Where's Emily?" Ryan's expression barely flickered, but Nathan saw it. A moment of recognition. "I don't know what you're talking about," Ryan said, starting to close the door. Nathan pushed against it. Stepping inside, Ryan stumbled back. "Hey man, you took her," Nathan said, his voice low. "You had her followed, didn't you? You threatened her. And now she's gone," Ryan scoffed, crossing his arms. "You got proof of that?" Nathan clenched his fists. "I don't need proof. I know her son was left waiting for a mother who never came back." For a split second, something flashed in Ryan's eyes. Something dark. That kid was supposed to... He stopped himself, jaw tightening. Nathan caught it. "Supposed to what?" Ryan shook his head. "I don't know where she is." But Nathan wasn't convinced. His gut told him there was more to this. Then his phone buzzed. A text from David. "Check abandoned storage unit near old train yard. Just got a tip." Nathan stepped back, glaring at Ryan. "If anything happens to Emily, you're done." Then, without another word, he turned and left. Nathan drove fast. His heart pounded as he pulled up near the train yard. It was nearly dark now, the air thick with the smell of rust and rain. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the old storage unit, his breath visible in the cold air. Then he saw her. Emily. She was tied to a chair, her face bruised, her wrists raw from struggling. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw Nathan. "Who?" "Hold on," Nathan said, rushing over and untying the ropes. "Oliver's safe. I've got him." Tears filled her eyes as she let out a shaky breath. "You have my son." Nathan nodded. "Come on, let's get you out of here." By the time the arts police arrived, Ryan was already in custody. He had tried to run, but Nathan had sent David the recording from their conversation, proof that he had a hand in Emily's disappearance. A few hours later, Nathan stood outside Marla's house. As Emily stepped up to the door, Oliver was waiting inside. Emily hesitated, glancing at Nathan. "I don't know how to thank you." Nathan smiled. "Just take care of him." She nodded, then stepped inside. Nathan watched as Oliver's face lit up at the sight of his mother. He ran into her arms, hugging her tight. For the first time in a long time, Nathan felt something he hadn't felt before. He had spent years building his fortune, believing that money was the only thing that mattered. But tonight, he had saved something far more valuable than anything money could buy. As he walked back to his car, the rain finally stopped, leaving behind a quiet, peaceful night. And for the first time in years, Nathan felt like he had truly done something that mattered.